Manually dialing in your GPU overclocks can actually make your card much more profitable than if you were to just copy some numbers that you found online. But let's be honest, tweaking AMD GPUs can feel super complicated. So in this video, I'm going to break down the basics of how to overclock any AMD GPU for mining any coin. Warning, there are people pretending to be me in the comments and on social platforms. I'll never ask you to add me on WhatsApp or Telegram, and I'll never ask you to send me money, crypto, or your personal information. Alright? So please be careful, use your common sense, and don't let any of these imposters fool you. Alright? Now back to the video. Hey, how's it going, GPU heads? Thanks for clicking on my video. Seb Hesler here. And guys, the fact is that every single GPU is individual and needs its own unique settings. And even if you have the exact same version of the exact same card that I do, the fact is that they probably still need different overclock settings in order to achieve optimal performance. So in this video, I'm going to go through the exact process of finding the optimal settings for your specific GPU, no matter what coin you're trying to mine. And in going through this process, you're going to find both the settings that will give you the highest possible hash rate, as well as the settings that will give you the best possible efficiency. Efficiency meaning, you know, the most hash rate per watt of power, so the best power efficient settings. And I'm also going to show you a trick for running your AMD GPUs a lot more stable mining on Windows, but you're gonna have to watch all the way to the end to see that. So this guide is aimed mostly at the latest RX 6000 series of AMD GPUs, and we're gonna be using Windows to do our overclocking today. The main points I'm going to cover here is how to overclock your core and your memory, as well as how to limit your core voltage in order to reduce your GPU's power consumption, all done in the AMD Radeon software. I'm then going to show you how to further tweak your power settings using the MorePowerTool by Igor's lab. For older AMD GPUs like Polaris or Vega cards, you might need to also do a BIOS flash in order to get the best performance out of your cards, as well as do some other power tweaks as well. I'm not going to cover how to do that in this video, but what I will do is I'll leave a link to a video on how to overclock older AMD cards in the description of this video. And just quickly before we get started, do keep in mind that even though nowadays overclocking is pretty much safe to do, it is still done at your own risk, so just keep that in mind. Alright, so let's get started. And the very first thing that I always do is I just launch my miner for the coin that I'm going to mine and that I'm overclocking for. So in this example, I'm going to be mining Ravencoin and finding the optimal overclocking settings for Ravencoin on my 6600 XT. So I'm just going to launch Team Red Miner here, mining Ravencoin. And then as that gets up and running, I'm going to start AMD Radeon Software, which is where we'll do all of our overclocking today. And the very first thing I do in here is, you come to performance, tuning, and then it will probably be on default. So the very first thing you do is just come to manual tuning and select custom. And then I start by just setting my fan speed to 100%. So enable fan tuning. I turn off 0 RPM here, and then I enable advanced control, and I just pull the leftmost dot all the way up to make sure it's always at 100%. Hit apply changes. And the reason for doing that is because, well, first of all, we want to make sure the card doesn't overheat and thermal throttle as we're tweaking it and trying different overclock settings, but also because we want the power draw of the fans to be constant while we're tuning. So we don't want, the card to get warmer and then because of that, the fans rev up and then it looks like the card is pulling more power while it's actually just the fan that is pulling more power. So that is what we do while tuning, and then once we found the overclock settings that we want, then you can lower your fan settings so that they are just high enough to keep your card cool. So a really short summary of the process is like this. You start the miner for whatever coin you want to find optimal overclock settings for, because keep in mind, different coins might require different overclock settings even on the same GPU, because some coins are more memory intensive, some are more core intensive, and some are both, and all in between, right? So you might need to tweak your card differently depending on what coin you're mining. So you launch the miner for whatever coin you want to tweak the card for. And once that is up and mining, you start doing all of your overclocking tweaks. And what you look at is how the hash rate and the power consumption for your card changes as you do your tweaks in the AMD Radeon software. And then once you've found the settings that you're happy with, I recommend mining with them for a few days or so and keep an eye on it. And what you want to be on the lookout for is, do you get, a fair few invalid shares, or does the GPU crash here and there? And if that is the case, that might be a good indication that you actually tweaked your card just a little bit too much, and you might need to reduce your overclocks or give the GPU just a little bit more power. So if that happens, make those slight tweaks and see if that doesn't solve your problems. All right, so we are up and mining Ravencoin with all stock settings. So we are ready to start doing some tweaking here. So as you can see, with these stock settings, we're getting around 15.5 mega hash. And according to the software, we are pulling around 130 watts. So now the very first thing I do in the AMD Radeon software is I come in here and I enable VRAM tuning. So I actually tune my VRAM first. So the very first thing I usually try is just changing timings to fast timings from default, hit apply changes, and then I swap back over to my miner and I see whether that has any effect at all or not. And if it doesn't, I tend to leave it back at default, but if it does have an effect on my hash rate or power consumption, then I leave it as fast timings. But it seems that in this case, it didn't have any effect for me, so I'm actually going to set it back to default. Now, the next thing is we're gonna start overclocking our memory, our VRAM. So I'm going to enable advanced control here. And basically what the process looks like now is I'll just slowly start increasing this, usually in increments of 50 megahertz, hit apply, and then I'll basically see how my card reacts. So if the hash rate increases, I know that I'm good and that I should keep pushing it that way. However, if the hash rate all of a sudden starts to decrease, then I know that I've probably pushed it too far. Or what you also might see if you push it too hard is that the card might crash, right? And then dial it back a little bit. So basically now it's just a process of push the memory clock by about 50 megahertz, see what happens in terms of hash rate and if it's stable. If it is, keep pushing it a little bit more and just keep going. However, if it's a coin where overclocking the memory doesn't seem to have any effect at all, what you might want to do instead is see how much you can lower the memory and basically how much you can get away with in terms of having the memory as low as possible. But for most modern coins that we're mining, pushing the memory up is going to result in a higher hash rate. So as we can see here, I pushed it up a little bit and we're getting around 0.4 mega hash more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, I'm going to push it another 50 to 2100, hit apply, see how we go, then push it another 50 and so on until I either see a decline in hash rate or a crash. So I'll do that and then I'll tell you what my results were. All right, so I ended up being able to go as high as 2300 on the VRAM, and that gave me a hash rate of 17.8 mega hash roughly, with a power draw of around 130 watts. Now, what happened when I pushed it higher than this was I immediately saw a hash rate decrease, which tells me that this is probably as high as my VRAM can go and still be stable mining, right? So that is it for tuning your VRAM. Now, the next thing is that we're gonna start pushing the actual GPU, so the core. And usually what I do is just enable GPU tuning here. I then also enable advanced control here. I will set the minimum frequency all the way down. And then usually what I'll do is I'll start by just increasing the frequency of the max frequency, that is, just a little bit. So maybe let's go 2800, and I'll apply those changes. And then I keep an eye on my miner to see if that has any sort of positive impact on my hash rate. And if it does, then just like with memory overclocking, I will push it a little bit more, see if that also has a positive impact, and keep going in that way. However, if it doesn't have a positive impact on hash rate, that kind of tells me that we'll probably be better off decreasing the frequency of our GPU, and then it's just a matter of finding what is the lowest frequency that we can find where the GPU is still performing optimally as we want it to, right? So I'm going to give this another minute here and see if increasing the max frequency actually did something good for us, and I'll check back in with you then. So no, basically increasing the frequency of our core had no positive impact whatsoever. So now, instead of keep pushing it up, I'm going to start pushing it downwards instead. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a pretty big jump here to start. So I'll go probably down to 2000, apply that, and see if that has any impact whatsoever. And then based on what happens there, I take my next step of either keep pushing it down or, you know, pushing it back up a little bit again if I lost too much hash rate or whatever. But I'll check in with you when I see what happened. All right, so what I found here was that pushing the core clock down had no negative impact whatsoever on hash rate, that is. And it also lowered power consumption pretty dramatically. So we are down to just 88 watts now, down from 130 before. So that definitely tells me we're going in the right direction here. So I'm just going to keep pushing my max frequency on the core downwards in increments. And I'm going to make the increments smaller and smaller the lower I get. And then basically I want to find what is the lowest I can go on my core frequency without losing out on a big significant amount of hash rate or efficiency. So I'm just gonna do that and I'll check back with you in a little bit. All right, so basically 1200 is the number I settled on for my max frequency on the core because that is where I saw I saw an ever so slight decrease in hash rate. We're at 17.3 mega hash here, but the power consumption is down to 70 watts now, which basically means that this was the best efficiency I could find, meaning this is where I got the most hash rate per watt in terms of my core clock frequency tuning, right? And I actually see now that the hash rate has jumped back up to 17.8 mega hash here, so even better. But basically, if I went any lower than 1200 on the core frequency here, my hash rate just took a massive jump off a cliff down to like 12 mega hash. So this is what I mean by like best efficiency. This is where I get the most hash rate out of the power that I'm feeding the card. So that is it for core clock tuning. Now let's get into the third and final parameter that we're going to be messing with here, which is the voltage. And so again, just like we did with max frequency, I'm just going to start pulling this down in small increments and see what happens. If I'm lucky, that will decrease the power consumption a little bit further without affecting our hash rate. But what I'm going to keep an eye on is basically just how low can I go without affecting the hash rate. And that's it. I'll check back in with you once I've found the sweet spot there. All right, so the number that I ended up on here was 1000 millivolt, or 1 volt basically. If I went any lower than that, my hash rate just started decreasing massively. I did not see a massive reduction in power by reducing this, but ever so slightly. We're down to 67 watts now, and this is basically it. This is my process of finding optimal overclock settings in Windows for your AMD GPUs. Now, there are some more things you can do, which we're going to talk about, and mainly those are if whatever coin you're mining, you're wanting to go even lower on the power settings here, you can do that by using the MorePowerTool, which is what I'm going to show you next. So as we can see here in the AMD Radeon software for my 6600 XT, the lowest I can go on the voltage here is 762 millivolts. And there might be certain cases where for certain cards mining certain coins, you are going to want to go lower than what this software allows you. And that is where the MorePowerTool by Igor's Lab comes into play. So I'm going to show you how to use that and how that all works. So let's start by closing AMD Radeon software here. And the very first thing you need to get is GPU-Z. So I'm just going to open that up. I'm not going to show you how to download these programs because I'm pretty sure you're watching a overclocking video. I think you know how to download and install a software on your computer. So here is GPU-Z, and the very first thing we need to do is just save the BIOS off of your GPU. So you make sure you select your GPU here, so the 6600 XT for me, and then we're just going to click this little Save BIOS button here, Save to File. And then I've already done it here, so you just save it wherever you want it on your hard drive and hit save. Then we open up the MorePowerTool. And in here, you again select the GPU you want to make the changes for. And then what you need to do is you need to load the BIOS that you just saved. So you come in and you open that up. Then what you can do is you can come in here. There's a whole bunch of settings that you can change on your GPU here. I'm not gonna get too far into all of it because you can drive yourself mad with all of these settings, but for all intents and purposes in this video, let's just say we want to go all the way down to 600 on our voltage. So I'm just going to enter that there. Then I'm going to hit Write SPPT, and it says successfully added. Okay. Then I'm going to exit, and now we just need to reboot the computer. Alright, so we're now rebooted, and if I come into our AMD Radeon software now, you can now see that here under the Performance tab, I can now lower my voltage all the way down to 600, whereas before we were capped at 762. So for those of you who might want to be able to go lower on the voltage there, that is how you do it. And to reset to default, all you do is just open up MorePowerTool again, select your GPU, hit delete SPPT, exit, and reboot again. And now, as you can see, we are capped at 762, just like we were before tweaking with MorePowerTool. Now, I also promised those of you who stayed till the end in this video a trick for running your AMD GPUs a lot more stable on Windows, and here that is. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take these settings that we found were the optimal for us in the AMD Radeon software, and we're actually going to put them directly into our mining batch file. So I have my batch files here. So let me find my CorePower one. I'm gonna right click it and I'm gonna say edit. And the very first thing that we need to do is add the full path to the executable here. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna scroll down until we find the .exe file here. I'm going to hold shift and right click on it. And I'm gonna say copy as path. And I'm just going to paste that in here. This is important because we need to run the miner as an administrator in order for the overclocks to take. And then once we've done that, we can basically just take the numbers that we had in our AMD Radeon software and start inputting them into our miner here. So we're going to start with our core clock megahertz. So we're gonna do dash CLK underscore core underscore MHZ. Now this is for Team Red Miner, and the syntax might be slightly different if you're using something else like Phoenix Miner, but the principles are usually the same. So I'm gonna enter our core clock here, which was 1200. Then I'm going to enter our voltage for the core. So again, dash CLK core millivolts equals, and that was 1000. And then finally, I'm going to do the memory, the VRAM overclock, which was 2300. So again, dash CLK underscore mem underscore MHZ equals 2300. Now you can also control your fan speed directly in the miner here as well. And you do that by hitting dash and typing fan underscore control equals, and then Team Red Miner gives you a lot of different options for setting minimum fan speed, maximum fan speed, and so on. However, for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to show you how to set a steady speed, which you do by just doing 3 colons like this, and then setting whatever percentage you want. So in my situation, I might say 70% fan speed. That will just lock the fans at 70% speed no matter what. And that is basically it. Then you just file, save, close, and then you just right click, run as administrator. And you don't need AMD Radeon Software open. As a matter of fact, it's probably better if it's closed when doing this. And the overclock settings will now be applied directly in the miner. And since you're only running 1 software instead of 2, that means stability is going to be much better. And if you have more than 1 GPU, you can still do it just this way. All you do is you just separate the GPUs by a comma. So let's say you want 1200 on the core clock for your first GPU, and then 1300 on your second GPU. You just say 1200, 1300, and that's it. As you can see, we're up and mining, and we've only just started, but we're up to the 17.5 or so mega hash at 68 watts that we were getting while overclocking in the AMD Radeon software. Now, if you found this video helpful, then please give it one of these. And if you really liked it, you can now join the channel to help support what I do here. It really does make a difference, and it means a lot to me, so thank you. But what you gotta do now is you gotta click on that next video on the screen. Because this video is over, you can also click the picture on my face to subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate that. But yeah, go click on that next video and I'll see you there. Goodbye. Goodbye, bye bye.